Yes, last night, the annual tradition, the Anaheim 1 preseason press conference, only a little bit different, now held virtually on Zoom, how very 2020. But at least it's for an Anaheim Supercross, which we actually haven't had since 2020. Also, feels like 5 years ago. Do you remember Justin Barcia and Adam Cianciarulo battling for the win? You probably don't, because it feels like 5 years ago. Now, the tradition of this press conference is that everyone wants the riders to talk trash. And the tradition is that they never do. I know firsthand. I'm Jason Weigandt. I got to host this press conference for a long time, starting in 2005, the famous Perfect Storm Anaheim. No arguing this point. This is fact. The 2005 Anaheim Supercross, the most stacked ever, okay? Because it is the only Supercross that had Jeremy McGrath, Travis Pastrana, James Stewart, Ricky Carmichael, and Chad Reed on the starting gate together. That's it. That's it. The only time. And they didn't even win the race. Kevin Windham did. How's that for hashtag deep field? Now, going into that 2005 event, that was my first year working the old Supercross Live webcast, but that also included hosting the press conferences, and that was actually more of a challenge. I'd already announced plenty of races. I knew how to do that. But it was really key to figure out what the approach was supposed to be to moderating these press conferences. And the folks that used to own Supercross back then, they did not mince words. The PR manager told me the goal is to get the riders to talk trash on each other. So many techniques were tried. First of all, ask them hard questions that would get them mad. We had alternating. Some years, the press conference, we'd have the riders all together on stage, and then someone realized they're more likely to talk trash on each other when the guy isn't sitting right next to him. So sometimes we'd have, especially with the post-race press conferences, individual, one rider by himself, and the other rider was supposed to be in a, quote, soundproof room, so he would not hear the trash talk. And it helped also that the riders and their entourages, the overall tension in the sport was really at a high in that '05 era, the Carmichael Reed Stu days. Now, it's funny that those three riders now will all say, it wasn't us. We were cool. It was our entourages. It was the gear guys, the goggle guys, the agents, the family members. They were the ones that ramped it up. It is true that the entourages really ramped it up, but the riders did their part. There was no doubt super tension between Reed, Carmichael, and Stu throughout that era. And I was being told to stoke those flames in the press conference. Now, as I would later learn, what's the old phrase? You get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar or bees or something like that. I don't know why you'd want either. But the point is that trying to get the guys to talk trash on each other never really worked. Every year we'd go into this press conference. We knew the guys hated each other, and we knew they wanted to stomp each other, and we knew they had just spent 4 months preparing to stomp each other because they hated each other, and then no one would say anything. And the Supercross bosses would get mad because they would say, man, what's the problem with the personality of these guys? And it's not just the bosses. The fans felt that way. The media felt that way. Occasionally, outside the sport, media members would come into these press conferences and really drop hard questions to try to spice the thing up and get the riders to really open up. And instead, they just clammed up more. So that's what everyone always wonders. These guys are elite, warrior, mental battle combat veterans. They do the gnarliest thing, a sport where you can get hurt really bad in a very nerve-wracking environment. Heck, any of us who've even raced locally with $0 on the line know how nervous you are when you go to the starting gate of a race. These guys are doing it to make a living from millions of dollars, and someone else is trying to take the money out of their pocket. The riders don't talk trash in the press conference because they're already nervous enough. They're already nervous enough. The entire race at the opening round of the season this year, Anaheim 2021 Monster Energy AMA Supercross, will come down to who rides best with the nerves and with the pressure. And that is why Justin Barcia has won 3 in a row. Barcia might not be the best rider of all time, but he is one of, if not the best riders under pressure. That's why the races where he tends to really stand out are the high pressure races.
Justin Barcia, Jeremy McGrath is the winningest rider in history at the opening round. He's won 5 of them, but he did 3 straight. You've now won 3 straight, and if you win on Saturday, you would break his record for the most consecutive opening round wins in Supercross history. I have to imagine the focus is on the championship, but with a record like that sitting there, is it tempting to go out and get that thing and try to take a cool record away from Jeremy McGrath?
I'd love to take it from Jeremy McGrath and make me feel really good. But obviously, like you said, that's not the main focus. But I love winning races, so why not go win the first race? Sounds good.
What is Barcia known for? He does really well and always raises his hand to race for Team USA, Motocross of Nations, super high pressure environment, and he always rides well at the Supercross opener, 2 Anaheims and last year at Houston, winning those races. Everyone is nervous at the opener. It doesn't matter how confident you are. You could be a Cooper Webb type who really feeds off confidence and exudes this, I know what I'm capable of, I know I can beat these guys. But even Webb has struggled at the opener in years past. Even the best, even a Jeremy McGrath or a James Stewart who had to go into races feeling like no one's going to beat me on speed, even those guys resisted the opportunity to talk trash because even they had to wonder, I don't know what anyone else has been doing for the last 4 months. What if they figured something out? What if my bike ends up being terrible and theirs ends up being good? What if I crash? What if I get hurt? What if I say something in this press conference that will eventually come back to haunt me? I've got enough to worry about. I am nervous enough for Anaheim 1. I don't need to add to it by making a bold claim and then having to back it up. I've asked all the guys about this. I've even asked Jeremy McGrath, who if anyone had reason to be cocky coming into the season opener, it is the greatest Supercross rider, the king of Supercross, Jeremy McGrath. And even he said you just didn't know what anyone was bringing to the opener. And also, why create more enemies than you need? Why have someone maybe get angry and emotional and try to take you out, for example, at the opening round? Why do that? Why risk something? I mean, what are you really gaining? A cool quote that gets the fans excited? They're more worried about winning the championship than giving us drama, unfortunately. And one year I remember at the press conference, James Stewart was asked, do you think you can go 17-0, which seemed like an attainable record at the time. We had seen Carmichael and McGrath win 13 in a row only a few years before that, and Carmichael was now retired, and in 07, Stewart kind of had the number of Chad Reed. So somebody actually asked Stewart if he could win 17 in a row. Stewart, even as good as he was, immediately deflected that. And Chad Reed was on that stage. I don't think his face was very happy to hear that people were predicting he would not be able to win any races. And then guess what? By round 3 of the series, Stewart was already gone with injury and Reed would go on to win the title. So again, that shows if you say something crazy, you know that all the variables, all the unpredictabilities of racing, that could all come back to haunt you. Imagine if Stewart had said, my goal is to go 17-0. And then he was hurt by round 3 and didn't even complete the series and Reed won the title. Do you know how bad he would have looked? Even Webb didn't really have anything wild to say yesterday. Took a compliment from the press about being a preseason favorite, but at the same time, in the press conference, all he could say is that everyone is good and you'd never know what's going to happen.
Revista Moto.
Thank you, Daniel. Hey, Cooper Webb, you are at your peak. It looks like you're at your peak performance coming into the 2022 season. I'm just curious, can you talk a little bit about how it feels to ride with the likes of Eli Tomac and Ken Roczen and to share the racetrack with those equally talented riders?
Yeah, it's awesome, man. I mean, like you said, I feel like I'm in a good position. You know, I just turned 26 and feel like, yeah, physically I'm in a really good spot, and experience in racing and all that stuff. It's a good place to be, and yeah, definitely exciting and cool to race those guys. And there's 15 other guys out there that are top level athletes as well.
Now, another example is Jason Anderson. Anderson feels like the unfiltered type, right? The one who wants to fire back at the haters and the critics. He does a good job of that on social media of saying, any of you armchair riding coaches, let me know what I need to do better in the comments. But he was set up with a hanging curveball right over the plate, crushed this one out of the ballpark from DMXS Radio's David Iser, and Anderson didn't take that bait.
Doing good. Hey, you're a free spirit, and in the media, we appreciate that. I promise you that something outside the ordinary. But unfortunately, this persistent narrative that you don't work as hard as your competition continues to follow you. It's a new year. It's a new team. Can you set the record straight? Reality versus perception with this narrative.
I guess the results will have to speak for themselves, right? But yeah, I mean, to be honest, to be at a top level like we are, you have to work hard somewhat, But for me, I feel like sometimes I like to work hard and maybe play harder, but it is what it is, and I enjoy myself and just keep it going, keep it rolling.
Yep, wouldn't do it. Reminds me of a couple of years ago, we had already pointed out on our preseason shows on Racer X that Anderson had not won a race since his 2018 season championship. And he was asked in the press conference, A lot of your critics have mentioned that you haven't won a race since 2018. How do you respond to that? And Anderson's response was, well, I guess they're right. I haven't won a race since 2018. Which leads me back to having these press conferences take place on Zoom. Probably got a couple of people mad. It's true. The atmosphere of Zoom and me sitting here at this desk right now at my house after I put my kids to bed, it's not quite as aggro. It's not quite as electric as it would be having a whole bunch of people and cameras and microphones inside a baseball stadium. It's not the same from that perspective. But I will say, Zoom has taught us something. Ever since having to move the press conferences to Zoom 2 years ago, the riders' answers are better and the media's questions are better. Yes, they're all deflecting going into Anaheim 1. That's too nerve-wracking an environment. But I guess it goes back to that old thing. We've all learned that public speaking is one of mankind's worst fears, right? Like, I literally found out that people hate public speaking, and I realized, well, I don't mind it that much, so maybe I should try to do public speaking for a living, because there probably wouldn't be that much competition for jobs. That's literally the genesis of how I ended up here doing public speaking. Even these athletes who have done it a million times, when you're judging what they say, you're actually judging them while they're public speaking, which is something that most people hate. And people would get on the media's case for not asking good questions at the press conference. But remember, when you stand up in the press box at Anaheim and grab that microphone, you also are now doing public speaking. So I think the press members were super nervous about asking questions as well. On Zoom, everything seems much more normal. This is the kind of communication we're used to. The riders give more elaborate answers to the questions, and the questions end up being a little bit more hard-hitting. What's not to love? I guess we'll keep it that way. It's not the fault of the personalities of the riders. It's just the super gnarly environment they live in, and they're trying to tamp that down a little bit. Although, little inside information, when I was at KTM's team launch about a month ago, Webb's mechanic, Carlos Rivera, said that he gave him a little challenge. You know how Webb usually responds with the chip on the shoulder when someone gives him something to get motivated about? Well, Carlos knows how to press those buttons now. And he told Cooper, he's like, man, why do you always do so bad at the beginning of the year? You're always having to make a comeback in points. And it's true. The last 3 seasons, Webb has not been great at the opener. He has 1 podium. Well, Carlos is poking him for a reason. He wants his guy to start the season strong, start the season with a win. And you know that Webb's going to want to respond to that challenge. Now, we haven't actually seen the defending champion of the series win the opener since 2012, and Ryan Villopoto did it. So obviously, those that are trying to play the long game and win the title are usually just trying to survive the first round. We all know the cliche about you can't win it at the opener, but you can certainly lose it. So we'll see which way Cooper Webb plays it. But we know that Webb, formerly the artist who was not afraid to mince words and send mental messages to his competitors, even he doesn't want to do that in 2022. He's a defending Supercross champ, and even he is going to try to let his riding do the talking on the podium. Sorry, folks, I tried for a long time. The riders just aren't going to bite. They're trying to stay relaxed. It'll be exciting enough on Saturday night.